In a small town nestled in the heart of America, life moved at a predictable pace. People went about their days with little thought to anything beyond their routines: work, family, and occasional community gatherings. Among them lived Marcus Davis, a man whose presence commanded respect without effort. Marcus was not just any resident. He was an Army lieutenant colonel, a decorated hero who had served his country faithfully for over 2 decades. His journey began as a young enlistee full of dreams, and through sheer determination he rose through the ranks, earning medals and commendations for bravery during 2 grueling tours in Afghanistan. Despite his achievements, Marcus remained humble, always choosing to blend into the fabric of his neighborhood rather than stand apart. On that fateful evening, Marcus decided to attend a local community event aimed at fostering better relations between residents and law enforcement. It was part of his commitment to giving back to society even after retiring from active duty. Dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, he mingled with neighbors, sharing stories and listening intently to concerns about safety and trust within the community. The meeting ended on a hopeful note, with promises of collaboration between citizens and police officers. As Marcus drove home, he felt optimistic about the future, unaware that fate had other plans for him that night. The roads were quiet, illuminated only by the soft glow of streetlights. A few miles from his house, Marcus noticed flashing lights. Ahead, a police checkpoint. He slowed down immediately, rolling down his window as he approached the barricade. One officer stepped forward, shining a flashlight into the car. "Good evening," Marcus said calmly, offering identification. "I live just around the corner." But instead of acknowledging his words, the officer barked orders, demanding Marcus step out of the vehicle. Confusion washed over Marcus's face. He repeated himself, explaining again that he was a neighbor heading home. Yet the tone of the interaction shifted rapidly. Another officer appeared, visibly agitated, shouting contradictory commands while gripping his weapon tightly. Tension filled the air as Marcus tried to comply with the escalating demands. Still seated in his car, he raised both hands slightly to show he posed no threat. But the situation spiraled out of control before anyone could react. Without warning, one of the officers drew their gun and fired directly at Marcus. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the otherwise silent streets. Time seemed to freeze as Marcus slumped forward, blood pooling on his chest. His car remained idling beside him, its headlights casting eerie shadows on the pavement. Panic erupted among bystanders who witnessed the horrifying scene unfold. Some screamed for help, others recorded videos on their phones, capturing the chaos that would soon ignite outrage across the nation. Word of the shooting traveled fast, reaching news outlets and social media platforms within minutes. By morning, headlines blared across every major network: Army Lieutenant Colonel shot by police. The story spread like wildfire, drawing attention not only because of Marcus's distinguished military background, but also due to the circumstances surrounding the incident. Questions poured in from all corners. Why had the officers resorted to lethal force so quickly? Why hadn't they attempted to de-escalate the situation? And most importantly, why did this keep happening to Black individuals in positions of authority? The public demanded answers, and pressure mounted on local officials to address the growing unrest. At the Pentagon, senior military leaders convened an emergency meeting upon hearing the news. They were livid, not just because one of their own had been attacked, but because it underscored a broader issue plaguing the nation. Racism and excessive use of force by law enforcement continued to tarnish the ideals of justice and equality. General Robert Hayes, a close friend of Marcus, slammed his fist on the table during the discussion. "This is unacceptable," he declared, his voice trembling with anger. "We send our soldiers to fight for freedom abroad, yet they come home to face discrimination and violence here. Enough is enough." The room fell silent, each person grappling with the weight of his words. Plans were made to support Marcus's family legally and financially, ensuring they wouldn't have to navigate this nightmare alone. As details emerged, investigators uncovered troubling patterns in the behavior of the officers involved. Body camera footage revealed that none of them followed proper protocol. Instead of calmly assessing the situation or clearly identifying themselves, they acted impulsively, fueled by assumptions based solely on appearance. Witnesses recounted hearing racial slurs hurled at Marcus moments before the shooting, painting a grim picture of prejudice driving the encounter. Lawyers representing Marcus's family argued that these actions were symptomatic of systemic issues within law enforcement, calling for sweeping reforms to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Meanwhile, protests erupted nationwide, with thousands taking to the streets to demand accountability and change. The investigation dragged on for months, prolonging the agony for Marcus's loved ones. During this time, Marcus fought hard to recover from his injuries. Doctors warned him that the damage done might end his military career permanently, a devastating blow for someone so deeply committed to service. Despite the physical pain, Marcus refused to let bitterness consume him. He leaned on his wife, Sarah, and their children, finding solace in their unwavering support. Together, they vowed to turn this tragedy into something meaningful, using their platform to advocate for justice and reform. Friends and colleagues rallied around them, organizing fundraisers and awareness campaigns to amplify their message. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Courtrooms overflowed with spectators eager to see if justice would prevail. Prosecutors presented a compelling case, highlighting how the officers' actions violated every principle of responsible policing. Expert witnesses, including retired military personnel, testified that Marcus's demeanor and compliance should have signaled zero threat. Defense attorneys struggled to justify the shooting, resorting to weak arguments about perceived danger. After weeks of emotional testimonies and heated debates, the jury reached a verdict: guilty on all charges for the officer who pulled the trigger. Cheers erupted outside the courthouse as the sentence was announced: life imprisonment without parole. For many, it marked a rare moment of accountability in a system long criticized for shielding bad actors. Though the trial brought some closure, the scars left behind ran deep. Marcus survived, but his life was forever altered. He walked with difficulty now, relying on a cane to steady himself. Yet, despite everything, he chose not to retreat into bitterness. Instead, he embraced activism, traveling across the country to speak at rallies and conferences. He shared his story openly, urging communities to work together toward healing and understanding. His advocacy inspired countless others to join the fight for reform, sparking legislative changes aimed at holding law enforcement accountable. Slowly but surely, Marcus became a symbol of resilience, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope can shine through. Through his courage, he reminded everyone that progress begins when we confront uncomfortable truths and refuse to look away. The aftermath of the shooting left the small town reeling, its once quiet streets now filled with tension and uncertainty. News crews descended upon the area, setting up cameras and microphones outside the police station and near the scene of the incident. Residents watched in disbelief as their peaceful community became the epicenter of a national debate about race, policing, and accountability. For Marcus's family, life had been turned upside down. His wife, Sarah, struggled to balance caring for her injured husband while shielding their children from the storm brewing around them. She sat by Marcus's bedside in the hospital, holding his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as she whispered prayers for his recovery. The weight of what had happened pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she refused to break, not when her family needed her most. Marcus lay in the hospital bed, his body battered but his spirit unyielding. Doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize him, performing surgeries to repair the damage caused by the bullet that had torn through his chest. Every day brought new challenges: painful physical therapy sessions, endless tests, and moments of doubt, when it seemed like progress was too slow. Yet even in his weakened state, Marcus remained determined. He knew he had survived for a reason, and he vowed to use his voice to make a difference. Nurses and doctors who cared for him couldn't help but admire his resilience. "He's one of the strongest patients we've ever seen," one nurse remarked to another during a late-night shift. "You can tell he's not just fighting for himself, he's fighting for something bigger." As word spread about the shooting, outrage grew across the nation. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags calling for justice, and petitions demanding accountability garnered millions of signatures. People from all walks of life shared Marcus's story, drawing parallels to other cases where black individuals had been targeted unjustly by law enforcement. Activists organized marches and vigils, flooding streets with signs bearing slogans like Black Lives Matter and Justice for Marcus Davis. In cities far removed from the small town where the tragedy occurred, crowds gathered to honor Marcus and demand systemic change. The movement gained momentum quickly, fueled by anger, frustration, and a collective desire to dismantle the structures that allowed such injustices to persist. Back in the town where it all began, tensions simmered between residents and local authorities. Some supported the officers involved, claiming they were simply doing their jobs under difficult circumstances. Others sided with Marcus, condemning the unnecessary use of lethal force. Conversations at grocery stores, schools, and coffee shops often turned heated, exposing deep divides within the community. The mayor called for calm, urging everyone to wait for the investigation's findings before jumping to conclusions. But patience was in short supply. Protesters camped outside the police department, chanting slogans and holding photos of Marcus in uniform. Their presence served as a constant reminder of the questions hanging over the heads of those in power. How could this happen? And what would be done to ensure it never happened again? Meanwhile, investigators worked around the clock to piece together exactly what transpired that night. Body camera footage provided crucial evidence, though it painted a disturbing picture. From the start, the interaction between Marcus and the officers appeared fraught with hostility. Commands were shouted simultaneously, creating confusion rather than clarity. At no point did the officers attempt to verify Marcus's identity or assess whether he posed any real threat. Instead, they escalated the situation unnecessarily, culminating in the fatal decision to open fire. Witnesses corroborated these findings, describing how the tone of the encounter shifted dramatically once the officers realized Marcus was black. One bystander recounted hearing racial slurs hurled at him, adding fuel to allegations of bias. The case drew widespread attention from civil rights organizations, legal experts, and government officials. Lawyers representing Marcus's family argued that the shooting was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of discriminatory practices embedded within law enforcement agencies nationwide. They pointed to statistics showing disproportionate rates of violence against black individuals, particularly those in positions of authority or perceived influence. "This isn't just about Marcus," one attorney stated during a press conference. "It's about every person who has ever been judged based on the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. We cannot move forward until we address these systemic failures head-on." Their arguments resonated with many, further galvanizing public support for reform. In the weeks that followed, pressure mounted on local officials to take decisive action. The police chief announced the suspension of all officers involved in the shooting, pending the outcome of the investigation. Internal reviews were launched to examine departmental policies and training procedures, though critics dismissed these efforts as mere window dressing. Community leaders called for external oversight, insisting that meaningful change required input from those directly affected by policing practices. Town hall meetings were held, providing residents with an opportunity to voice their concerns and propose solutions. While some attendees expressed hope that dialogue might lead to healing, others remained skeptical, questioning whether anything substantial would come of it. For Marcus, the road to recovery was long and arduous. Physical therapy sessions pushed him to his limits, forcing him to confront the reality of his injuries. Simple tasks like walking or lifting objects became monumental challenges. Yet he persevered, driven by a sense of purpose that transcended personal pain. Friends and former colleagues visited regularly, offering encouragement and sharing stories of how his ordeal had inspired them to speak out against injustice. One fellow veteran told him, "You're still leading, Marcus, even from that hospital bed. Your courage is lighting a fire in all of us." These words buoyed Marcus's spirits, reinforcing his belief that his survival was meant to serve a greater mission. Amidst the turmoil, Sarah emerged as a pillar of strength for her family. Balancing caregiving duties with advocacy work, she became a vocal advocate for reform, speaking at rallies and interviews alongside Marcus. Her eloquence and passion struck a chord with audiences, humanizing the impact of police violence on families. Together, they formed a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting accountability and fostering trust between communities and law enforcement. Funds raised through donations supported initiatives aimed at educating officers on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. Sarah often reflected on how much their lives had changed, acknowledging both the pain and the unexpected opportunities for growth. "We didn't choose this path," she said during one interview, "but if sharing our story can save even one life, then it will have been worth it." As the months passed, the nation watched closely as preparations for the trial began. Legal teams on both sides meticulously reviewed evidence, strategizing how best to present their cases. Prosecutors focused on highlighting the reckless disregard for protocol displayed by the officers, emphasizing how easily the situation could have been resolved without bloodshed. Defense attorneys countered by attempting to cast doubt on Marcus's innocence, suggesting he may have contributed to the escalation, a claim vehemently refuted by witnesses and experts alike. The anticipation surrounding the trial reached a fever pitch, with many viewing it as a pivotal moment in the broader struggle for justice. During this time, Marcus slowly regained some semblance of normalcy. Though his military career was effectively over due to his injuries, he found new ways to contribute. He began writing op-eds and giving speeches, using his platform to amplify marginalized voices and push for policy changes. His message was clear. True progress required confronting uncomfortable truths about racism and inequality. He challenged listeners to look beyond headlines and statistics, urging them to see the humanity behind each victim of police brutality. "I survived so I could speak for those who didn't get the chance," he declared at a packed auditorium. "Let my story remind you that silence is complicity. We must stand together and demand better." The ripple effects of Marcus's ordeal extended far beyond his hometown. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within law enforcement agencies. Training programs were revamped to emphasize cultural sensitivity and conflict resolution. Schools incorporated discussions about systemic racism into their curricula, encouraging younger generations to think critically about societal inequities. While skeptics questioned whether these measures went far enough, there was undeniable momentum toward change. Marcus's story had ignited a spark that refused to be extinguished, proving that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. As the trial date approached, emotions ran high. Supporters of Marcus gathered outside courthouses, holding candles and banners emblazoned with messages of solidarity. Critics of the officers involved voiced their frustrations, calling for swift punishment. Meanwhile, Marcus himself remained steadfast, focusing not on vengeance but on ensuring that his experience catalyzed lasting transformation. "I'm here because I believe in second chances, for myself, for my community, and for the system," he told a reporter days before the proceedings began. If we can learn from this, the day of the trial arrived and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jostled for seats, cameras clicking furiously as Marcus entered the room supported by his wife, Sarah, and a close friend. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with quiet dignity, his eyes scanning the crowded space before settling on the judge's bench. The atmosphere was tense, charged with emotion, as if everyone present understood the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just about one man or one incident. It was about accountability, justice, and whether the system could rise above its flaws to deliver fairness. For Marcus, it was personal. For the nation watching, it was symbolic. Prosecutors opened the case with a powerful statement, painting a vivid picture of what had transpired that fateful night. They described Marcus as a decorated veteran who had dedicated his life to protecting others only to be met with hostility and violence when he least expected it. Using body camera footage, witness testimonies, and expert analysis, they methodically dismantled the defense's narrative that the officers acted out of fear. "Fear does not justify murder," the lead prosecutor declared. Her voice steady but filled with conviction, she pointed out how none of the officers followed standard protocol. No de-escalation, no clear communication, and certainly no justification for lethal force. Her words resonated deeply, leaving many in the audience visibly moved. Defense attorneys countered by attempting to cast doubt on the sequence of events, suggesting that Marcus might have contributed to the escalation. They argued that the officers were under immense pressure and believed their lives were in danger. However, their claims lacked substance, undermined by the overwhelming evidence presented against them. Witnesses recounted hearing racial slurs, hurled at Marcus moments before the shooting, exposing the prejudice that tainted the interaction. One officer, called to testify, faltered under cross-examination, unable to provide a coherent explanation for why lethal force was used so recklessly. By the end of the first week, cracks began to show in the defense's strategy, and public opinion tilted decisively in favor of justice. For Marcus, sitting through the trial was excruciating. Each testimony forced him to relive the trauma of that night, the memory of pain and betrayal searing fresh wounds. Yet he remained composed, drawing strength from Sarah, who sat beside him holding his hand tightly. Their bond became a source of inspiration for those following the case closely. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered daily, chanting slogans and waving banners emblazoned with Marcus's name. Some brought flowers, placing them near a makeshift memorial that had sprung up overnight. It was a testament to how deeply his story had touched people across the country, uniting strangers in a shared call for change. As the trial progressed, experts took the stand to shed light on systemic issues plaguing law enforcement. Retired military personnel spoke about the absurdity of perceiving Marcus, a man trained to follow orders, as a threat. Sociologists highlighted patterns of racial profiling and implicit bias, pointing out how Black individuals, regardless of status or background, often faced disproportionate scrutiny. Legal scholars dissected the lack of accountability within police departments, urging reforms to ensure transparency and prevent future tragedies. These testimonies added layers of context to the case, transforming it into more than just a legal battle. It became a referendum on policing practices nationwide. By the third week, the prosecution rested its case, having laid bare the reckless disregard for human life displayed by the officers. Jurors listened intently, taking notes as closing arguments unfolded. The lead prosecutor delivered a stirring speech, reminding the jury of their responsibility to uphold justice. "This is not just about punishing wrongdoing," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "It's about sending a message that we will no longer tolerate racism and brutality masquerading as law enforcement. We owe it to Lieutenant Colonel Davis, to his family, and to every person who has ever been failed by this system." Her words hung heavy in the air, punctuating weeks of painstaking deliberation. When the jury finally retired to deliberate, the wait felt interminable. News outlets provided round-the-clock coverage, speculating endlessly about the outcome. Protesters camped outside the courthouse, refusing to leave until a verdict was reached. Inside, Marcus and his family waited anxiously, unsure of what lay ahead. Would justice prevail, or would they be left grappling with yet another disappointment? Days stretched into nights, each hour amplifying the tension. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the jury returned with their decision: guilty on all counts for the officer who fired the shot. Gasps erupted in the courtroom as the judge announced the sentence: life imprisonment without parole. Cheers broke out outside, echoing through the streets as news spread rapidly. While the verdict brought relief, it also underscored the long road ahead. Marcus knew that true healing required more than punishment. It demanded systemic change. He continued to advocate tirelessly, traveling across the country to share his story and push for reforms. His nonprofit organization gained traction, partnering with lawmakers, educators, and activists to develop programs aimed at addressing implicit bias and fostering trust between communities and police forces. Schools incorporated discussions about systemic racism into their curricula, encouraging younger generations to think critically about societal inequities. Training programs for officers were revamped, emphasizing cultural sensitivity and conflict resolution. Sarah, too, played a pivotal role in driving change. Her eloquence and passion made her a sought-after speaker at rallies and conferences. Together, she and Marcus formed a formidable team, channeling their pain into purpose. They spoke openly about the challenges they faced, from navigating medical bills to coping with emotional scars. Their vulnerability resonated with audiences, humanizing the impact of police violence on families. "We didn't choose this path," Sarah often reminded listeners during interviews. "But if sharing our story can save even one life, then it will have been worth it." Despite the progress, setbacks lingered. Critics dismissed reform efforts as insufficient, arguing that meaningful change required deeper structural overhauls. Some officers resisted new policies, viewing them as attacks on their profession rather than opportunities for growth. Resistance came from unexpected quarters too. Politicians hesitant to alienate certain voter bases, unions reluctant to relinquish protections for members accused of misconduct. Yet Marcus refused to let cynicism dampen his resolve. He understood that change was rarely linear, fraught with obstacles and detours along the way. What mattered most was staying committed to the vision of a fairer, more equitable society. His advocacy work inspired countless others to join the fight. Young activists organized grassroots campaigns, leveraging social media to amplify marginalized voices. Artists created murals honoring victims of police brutality, turning city walls into canvases of remembrance. Musicians wrote songs capturing the spirit of resistance, melodies carrying messages of hope and resilience. Across industries, people found ways to contribute, proving that collective action could spark transformation. Marcus's story became a rallying cry, symbolizing both the pain of injustice and the power of perseverance. Even as he embraced his role as a public figure, Marcus never lost sight of his roots. He returned frequently to his hometown, reconnecting with neighbors and participating in community initiatives. Though tensions still simmered between residents and local authorities, there were signs of progress. Dialogue replaced hostility, with town hall meetings fostering open conversations about race, safety, and accountability. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild, not fully but enough to plant seeds of hope. Marcus saw these small victories as stepping stones toward larger goals, reminders that change started locally before spreading outward. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded, leaning on faith and family to sustain him. Physical therapy sessions continued to challenge him, pushing him to reclaim mobility inch by painful inch. Friends marveled at his determination, marveling at how he managed to smile despite everything. "You're stronger than anyone I know," one colleague once told him during a visit. Marcus simply nodded, acknowledging the compliment without dwelling on it. Strength wasn't something he sought. It was something thrust upon him, forged in the crucible of adversity. As years passed, Marcus's legacy grew beyond the tragedy that defined him. Textbooks began including his story as a case study in discussions about systemic racism and police reform. Documentaries chronicled his journey, capturing raw emotions and unflinching truths. Universities invited him to deliver keynote speeches, eager to learn from someone who had turned personal suffering into societal progress. Awards poured in, recognizing his contributions to advocacy and leadership. Yet, Marcus accepted accolades humbly, always redirecting focus to the broader movement. "I'm just one voice among many," he'd say modestly. Real change happens when we listen to each other and act together. Looking back, Marcus sometimes wondered what might have happened had fate taken a different turn that night. Would he still be serving actively in the military? Or perhaps enjoying retirement quietly with Sarah and their children? The questions lingered, unanswered but not regret. The verdict sent shockwaves across the nation, sparking both celebration and reflection. For many, it was a rare moment of accountability in a system often criticized for shielding those who abused power. The guilty sentence handed down to the officer responsible for shooting Marcus Davis marked a turning point, a signal that justice could be served when public pressure aligned with legal integrity. Yet as jubilation erupted outside courthouses and on social media platforms, Marcus himself remained contemplative. He understood the significance of the ruling, but also recognized that one case did not erase centuries of systemic inequities. True change required sustained effort, not fleeting victories. In the weeks following the trial, Marcus became a central figure in national conversations about policing reform. Lawmakers invited him to testify before Congress, where he delivered a poignant speech urging legislators to prioritize transparency and accountability within law enforcement agencies. "This isn't just about me," he emphasized, his voice steady yet impassioned. "It's about every person who has ever been failed by a system meant to protect them. We cannot wait for another tragedy to act." His words resonated deeply, prompting bipartisan support for new legislation aimed at addressing implicit bias, improving training protocols, and increasing oversight. Bills were introduced requiring mandatory body cameras for all officers, independent investigations into use of force incidents, and stricter penalties for misconduct. While some critics dismissed these measures as insufficient, they represented tangible steps toward progress. As momentum built, Marcus threw himself into advocacy work, traveling tirelessly to speak at rallies, conferences, and community events. Each appearance drew large crowds eager to hear his story and learn how they could contribute to the cause. At a packed auditorium in Chicago, he addressed an audience of students, activists, and educators, challenging them to confront uncomfortable truths about racism and inequality. "Silence is complicity," he declared, his tone firm yet compassionate. "If we truly want change, we must speak up, even when it's hard, even when it feels like no one is listening." His message struck a chord, inspiring young people to organize protests, start petitions, and engage in difficult dialogues with peers and authority figures alike. Sarah stood steadfastly by her husband's side, amplifying their shared mission through her own eloquence and passion. Together they formed partnerships with civil rights organizations, grassroots movements, and academic institutions to develop comprehensive strategies for reform. One initiative focused on creating educational programs designed to teach children about systemic racism from an early age. Another sought to bridge gaps between communities and police forces by fostering open communication and mutual understanding. These efforts gained widespread recognition, earning endorsements from influential leaders and garnering significant funding. Slowly but surely, seeds of transformation began to take root. Despite the growing momentum, resistance persisted. Some officers resisted new policies, viewing them as threats to their autonomy or attacks on their profession. Police unions lobbied aggressively against proposed reforms, arguing that increased accountability jeopardized safety. Politicians wary of alienating certain voter bases hesitated to push for sweeping changes, opting instead for incremental adjustments. Critics pointed out that without addressing deeper structural issues, such as economic disparity and unequal access to resources, reforms risked being superficial. Marcus acknowledged these challenges openly, reminding supporters that progress rarely followed a straight line. "Change is messy," he told a reporter during a televised interview. "It requires patience, persistence, and faith that what we're doing matters." Back in his hometown, tensions between residents and local authorities showed signs of easing, though scars remained. Dialogue replaced hostility at town hall meetings, where neighbors voiced concerns directly to police, chiefs, and city officials. Officers participated in workshops led by experts on de-escalation techniques and cultural sensitivity, learning to approach situations with empathy rather than aggression. Community policing initiatives encouraged officers to engage with residents, beyond routine patrols, attending block parties, school events, and neighborhood cleanups. Though trust took time to rebuild, small victories offered hope. A teenager once skeptical of law enforcement joined a mentorship program pairing kids with officers, discovering unexpected common ground. An elderly woman who had long avoided interacting with police found herself chatting warmly with a patrol officer over coffee. These moments, though seemingly minor, symbolized shifts in perception and attitude. For Marcus, personal recovery intertwined with his advocacy work. Physical therapy sessions continued to challenge him, pushing him to reclaim mobility inch by painful inch. Friends marveled at his determination, marveling at how he managed to smile despite everything. "You're stronger than anyone I know," one colleague remarked during a visit. Marcus simply nodded, accepting the compliment graciously but humbly. Strength wasn't something he sought. It was something forged in the crucible of adversity. He leaned heavily on faith and family, finding solace in Sarah's unwavering support and his children's laughter. Their resilience inspired him daily, reinforcing his belief that love and unity could overcome hatred and division. As years passed, Marcus's legacy expanded beyond the tragedy that defined him. Textbooks began including his story as a case study in discussions about systemic racism and police reform. Documentaries chronicled his journey, capturing raw emotions and unflinching truths. Universities invited him to deliver keynote speeches, eager to learn from someone who had turned personal suffering into societal progress. Awards poured in, recognizing his contributions to advocacy and leadership. Yet, Marcus accepted accolades modestly, always redirecting focus to the broader movement. "I'm just one voice among many," he'd say humbly. "Real change happens when we listen to each other and act together." Even as recognition grew, Marcus never lost sight of his roots. He returned frequently to his hometown, reconnecting with neighbors and participating in community initiatives. Local schools named scholarships after him, supporting students pursuing careers in public service or social justice. A park near his house installed a plaque honoring his courage, serving as a reminder of resilience and hope. On weekends, Marcus could often be found mentoring young people, sharing wisdom gleaned from years of struggle and triumph. His presence alone motivated others to believe in themselves and their ability to effect change. Through it all, Marcus remained acutely aware of the work still needed. Progress was uneven, with some areas advancing rapidly while others lagged behind. Incidents of police brutality continued to make headlines, underscoring the enduring nature of systemic racism. Yet Marcus refused to succumb to despair. Instead, he channeled frustration into action, doubling down on efforts to educate, empower, and unite. He collaborated with artists, musicians, and filmmakers to create content highlighting stories of injustice and resilience. Murals honoring victims of police violence adorned city walls, turning urban landscapes into canvases of remembrance. Songs capturing the spirit of resistance played on radios nationwide, melodies carrying messages of hope and determination. Marcus's advocacy extended internationally, drawing attention from global audiences grappling with similar struggles. Activists overseas reached out, seeking advice on organizing movements and navigating political systems resistant to change. He responded generously, sharing insights gained from years of experience while emphasizing the importance of tailoring strategies to local contexts. International conferences featured him as a keynote speaker, eager to learn from someone whose journey transcended borders. Through these interactions, Marcus realized the universality of the fight for justice, a realization that deepened his commitment further. Looking back, Marcus sometimes wondered what might have happened had fate taken a different turn that night. Would he still be serving actively in the military? Or perhaps enjoying retirement quietly with Sarah and their children? The questions lingered unanswered but not regretful. Instead, he chose to see his survival as a gift, an opportunity to make a difference where it mattered most. Through his courage and resilience, he reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. And though the scars of that night would forever remain, so too would the lessons learned and the lives touched by his unwavering commitment to justice. His story became more than just a tale of survival. It evolved into a beacon of possibility. People saw in Marcus a reflection of their own potential, to rise above adversity, to challenge injustice, and to inspire others along the way. Whether speaking to thousands at a rally or comforting a grieving family privately, Marcus embodied the essence of leadership: humility, empathy, and relentless dedication. As he looked toward the future, he carried with him the knowledge that change was possible, not inevitable, but attainable through collective effort. And so, with renewed vigor, he pressed forward, determined to leave behind a legacy not of bitterness, but of hope. Years after the trial, Marcus's influence continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what he could have imagined. His advocacy work had evolved from a personal mission into a global movement, inspiring countless individuals to take action in their own communities. The reform sparked by his case began to bear fruit, albeit slowly and unevenly. Police departments across the country adopted new training programs focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity, while independent oversight boards were established to review cases of misconduct. Despite these strides, Marcus remained vigilant, understanding that systemic change required constant vigilance and adaptation. He often reminded supporters that progress was not a destination, but an ongoing journey, one that demanded patience, persistence, and unwavering resolve. In cities where tensions between law enforcement and residents ran high, Marcus's story served as a bridge, fostering dialogue and mutual understanding. Community leaders invited him to mediate discussions, leveraging his credibility to bring opposing sides together. At one such meeting in Baltimore, a city long plagued by distrust, Marcus listened intently as both officers and citizens shared their frustrations and fears. "We're all human beings trying to do our best," he said during closing remarks, his voice calm yet resolute. "But we can't move forward unless we acknowledge the pain we've caused each other and commit to doing better." His words resonated deeply, prompting participants to exchange contact information and plan follow-up sessions aimed at building lasting relationships. Sarah, too, played a pivotal role in advancing the cause, channeling her energy into educational initiatives. She co-authored a book detailing their family's ordeal, weaving personal anecdotes with broader insights about systemic racism and resilience. The publication became a bestseller, praised for its raw honesty and practical advice on navigating trauma. Schools incorporated excerpts into curricula, sparking meaningful conversations among students about privilege, bias, and allyship. Sarah also launched a podcast series featuring interviews with activists, scholars, and survivors of police violence, amplifying voices often marginalized in mainstream discourse. Her efforts complemented Marcus's work beautifully, creating a multifaceted approach to advocacy that addressed both hearts and minds. Despite the positive momentum, challenges persisted. Resistance to reform came from unexpected quarters, with some arguing that increased accountability jeopardized officer safety or hindered effective policing. Critics claimed that body cameras invaded privacy and that oversight boards overstepped boundaries. Meanwhile, incidents of police brutality continued to surface, underscoring the deep-rooted nature of the problem. Each new case reignited debates about whether existing measures went far enough or if they merely scratched the surface of deeper structural inequities. Marcus acknowledged these complexities openly, urging supporters not to lose heart. "Change is messy," he reiterated during a panel discussion. "It requires us to confront uncomfortable truths and make sacrifices for the greater good." Even as setbacks tested their resolve, Marcus and Sarah found strength in their partnership. Their bond grew stronger with each challenge they faced, serving as a testament to the power of unity in adversity. They leaned on each other during difficult times, drawing comfort from shared memories and dreams for the future. Family gatherings provided much-needed respite, offering moments of joy amidst the relentless pursuit of justice. Their children, now teenagers, began taking active roles in advocacy work, organizing fundraisers and participating in marches. Watching them grow into compassionate, socially conscious individuals filled Marcus and Sarah with pride, reinforcing their belief that the next generation held the key to lasting transformation. Marcus's physical recovery remained a work in progress, though he refused to let lingering injuries define him. Physical therapy sessions pushed him to his limits, requiring immense discipline and perseverance. Yet, he approached each session with determination, viewing it as another opportunity to prove his resilience. Friends marveled at his ability to maintain optimism despite chronic pain, crediting his unwavering faith and sense of purpose. "You inspire me every day," a close colleague once told him during a visit. Marcus smiled modestly, deflecting praise as always. For him, strength wasn't something to boast about. It was simply part of who he was. As his reputation grew, so did invitations to speak at prestigious events worldwide. Universities awarded him honorary degrees, recognizing his contributions to social justice and leadership. International organizations sought his expertise, eager to learn how his experiences might inform strategies for combating racism and inequality globally. During a trip to South Africa, Marcus connected with activists fighting apartheid-era legacies, finding parallels between their struggles and his own. These interactions deepened his appreciation for the universality of the fight for justice, a realization that fueled his commitment further. Wherever he went, Marcus carried a message of hope, reminding audiences that no matter how daunting the obstacles, collective action could spark transformation. Back home, Marcus's presence remained a source of inspiration for his community. Local schools named scholarships after him, supporting students pursuing careers in public service or activism. A park near his house installed a plaque honoring his courage, serving as a reminder of resilience and possibility. On weekends, Marcus could often be found mentoring young people, sharing wisdom gleaned from years of struggle and triumph. His ability to connect with others transcended age, race, and background, making him a trusted confidant and guide. Whether counseling a teenager grappling with identity issues or advising a veteran navigating civilian life, Marcus approached each interaction with empathy and authenticity. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded, refusing to let accolades overshadow the broader mission. Award ceremonies and media appearances never distracted him from the real work happening on the ground: grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and community engagement. He collaborated with artists, musicians, and filmmakers to create content highlighting stories of injustice and resilience. Murals honoring victims of police violence adorned city walls, turning urban landscapes into canvases of remembrance. Songs capturing the spirit of resistance played on radios nationwide, melodies carrying messages of hope and determination. These creative expressions added emotional depth to the movement, ensuring that it resonated on a visceral level. Internationally, Marcus's influence expanded, drawing attention from global audiences grappling with similar struggles. Activists overseas reached out, seeking advice on organizing movements and navigating political systems resistant to change. He responded generously, sharing insights gained from years of experience while emphasizing the importance of tailoring strategies to local contexts. International conferences featured him as a keynote speaker, eager to learn from someone whose journey transcended borders. Through these interactions, Marcus realized the universality of the fight for justice, a realization that deepened his commitment further. Looking back, Marcus sometimes wondered what might have happened had fate taken a different turn that night. Would he still be serving actively in the military? Or perhaps enjoying retirement quietly with Sarah and their children? The questions lingered, unanswered but not regretful. Instead, he chose to see his survival as a gift, an opportunity to make a difference where it mattered most. Through his courage and resilience, he reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. And though the scars of that night would forever remain, so too would the lessons learned and the lives touched by his unwavering commitment to justice. His story became more than just a tale of survival. It evolved into a beacon of possibility. People saw in Marcus a reflection of their own potential, to rise above adversity, to challenge injustice, and to inspire others along the way. Whether speaking to thousands at a rally, or comforting a grieving family privately, Marcus embodied the essence of leadership, humility, empathy, and relentless dedication. As he looked toward the future, he carried with him the knowledge that change was possible, not inevitable but attainable through collective effort. And so, with renewed vigor, he pressed forward, determined to leave behind a legacy not of bitterness but of hope. For Marcus, the journey was far from over. He understood that true justice required dismantling systems of oppression built over centuries, a task that spanned generations. Yet, he took solace in knowing that every step forward mattered, no matter how small. Whether mentoring a young activist advocating for policy reform, or simply listening to someone share their story, Marcus embraced each moment as an opportunity to contribute to something larger than himself. His life became a testament to the power of resilience, proving that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, it was possible to find purpose and meaning. Through his courage and determination, Marcus reminded everyone that while the road ahead might be long, the destination, a fairer, more equitable society, was worth every step. Years after the trial, Marcus's legacy continued to grow, his story becoming a cornerstone of movements for justice and reform. What began as a personal tragedy had transformed into a catalyst for change, inspiring countless individuals to take action in their own lives. His advocacy work transcended borders, reaching communities around the world grappling with similar struggles. In countries where systemic racism and police brutality were deeply entrenched, activists cited Marcus's journey as proof that accountability and healing were possible, even against overwhelming odds. His name became synonymous with resilience, courage, and the belief that collective effort could dismantle oppressive systems. At home, Marcus remained deeply involved in grassroots efforts, working tirelessly to ensure that reforms didn't remain confined to policy papers but translated into tangible improvements on the ground. He collaborated with local organizations to implement programs aimed at fostering trust between law enforcement and marginalized communities. One such initiative brought officers and residents together for monthly dialogues, creating spaces where grievances could be aired openly and solutions brainstormed collaboratively. These sessions often started tense, with mistrust lingering in the air, but over time, they fostered understanding and even friendships. Officers who once viewed residents with suspicion found themselves laughing alongside them during community events, while citizens who had feared the police learned to see them as human beings capable of growth and empathy. Sarah, too, continued her work, expanding the non-profit organization she and Marcus had founded to address systemic inequities beyond policing. The group launched campaigns targeting economic disparities, unequal access to education, and healthcare gaps that disproportionately affected Black and minority communities. They partnered with schools to create mentorship programs pairing underprivileged students with professionals from diverse fields, showing young people that success was attainable despite societal barriers. Scholarships funded by the nonprofit helped dozens of students pursue higher education, many of whom went on to become leaders in their respective industries. Sarah's passion for storytelling also led her to produce documentaries highlighting stories of resilience and triumph, ensuring that voices often ignored by mainstream narratives were heard loud and clear. Despite these achievements, resistance to change persisted. Some argued that reforms undermined law enforcement's ability to maintain order, while others claimed they unfairly singled out officers for scrutiny. Critics dismissed calls for accountability as attacks on authority, framing advocates like Marcus as enemies of peace rather than champions of justice. Yet Marcus refused to engage in divisive rhetoric, choosing instead to focus on building bridges. "We're not here to tear anyone down," he said during a televised interview. "We're here to lift everyone up, to create a system that works for all of us, not just some of us." His words resonated with many, reminding skeptics that progress benefited society as a whole. Even as external challenges mounted, Marcus faced internal battles of his own. Physical therapy remained a daily struggle, with chronic pain serving as a constant reminder of the night that changed everything. But he approached each session with determination, viewing it as another opportunity to reclaim agency over his life. Friends marveled at his ability to endure hardship without bitterness, crediting his unwavering faith and sense of purpose. "You inspire me every day," a close colleague once told him during a visit. Marcus smiled modestly, deflecting praise as always. For him, strength wasn't something to boast about. It was simply part of who he was. As his reputation grew, so did invitations to speak at prestigious events worldwide. Universities awarded him honorary degrees, recognizing his contributions to social justice and leadership. International organizations sought his expertise, eager to learn how his experiences might inform strategies for combating racism and inequality globally. During a trip to South Africa, Marcus connected with activists fighting apartheid-era legacies, finding parallels between their struggles and his own. These interactions deepened his appreciation for the universality of the fight for justice, a realization that fueled his commitment further. Wherever he went, Marcus carried a message of hope, reminding audiences that no matter how daunting the obstacles, collective action could spark transformation. Back home, Marcus's presence remained a source of inspiration for his community. Local schools named scholarships after him, supporting students pursuing careers in public service or activism. A park near his house installed a plaque honoring his courage, serving as a reminder of resilience and possibility. On weekends, Marcus could often be found mentoring young people, sharing wisdom gleaned from years of struggle and triumph. His ability to connect with others transcended age, race, and background, making him a trusted confidant and guide. Whether counseling a teenager grappling with identity issues or advising a veteran navigating civilian life, Marcus approached each interaction with empathy and authenticity. Through it all, Marcus remained grounded, refusing to let accolades overshadow the broader mission. Award ceremonies and media appearances never distracted him from the real work happening on the ground: grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and community engagement. He collaborated with artists, musicians, and filmmakers to create content highlighting stories of injustice and resilience. Murals honoring victims of police violence adorned city walls, turning urban landscapes into canvases of remembrance. Songs capturing the spirit of resistance played on radios nationwide, melodies carrying messages of hope and determination. These creative expressions added emotional depth to the movement, ensuring that it resonated on a visceral level. Internationally, Marcus's influence expanded, drawing attention from global audiences grappling with similar struggles. Activists overseas reached out, seeking advice on organizing movements and navigating political systems resistant to change. He responded generously, sharing insights gained from years of experience, while emphasizing the importance of tailoring strategies to local contexts. International conferences featured him as a keynote speaker, eager to learn from someone whose journey transcended borders. Through these interactions, Marcus realized the universality of the fight for justice, a realization that deepened his commitment further. Looking back, Marcus sometimes wondered what might have happened had fate taken a different turn that night. Would he still be serving actively in the military? Or perhaps enjoying retirement quietly with Sarah and their children? The questions lingered, unanswered but not regretful. Instead, he chose to see his survival as a gift, an opportunity to make a difference where it mattered most. Through his courage and resilience, he reminded everyone that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. And though the scars of that night would forever remain, so too would the lessons learned and the lives touched by his unwavering commitment to justice. His story became more than just a tale of survival. It evolved into a beacon of possibility. People saw in Marcus a reflection of their own potential, to rise above adversity, to challenge injustice, and to inspire others along the way. Whether speaking to thousands at a rally or comforting a grieving family privately, Marcus embodied the essence of leadership: humility, empathy, and relentless dedication. As he looked toward the future, he carried with him the knowledge that change was possible, not inevitable but attainable through collective effort. And so, with renewed vigor, he pressed forward, determined to leave behind a legacy not of bitterness but of hope. For Marcus, the journey was far from over. He understood that true justice required dismantling systems of oppression built over centuries, a task that spanned generations. Yet he took solace in knowing that every step forward mattered, no matter how small. Whether mentoring a young activist, advocating for policy reform, or simply listening to someone share their story, Marcus embraced each moment as an opportunity to contribute to something larger than himself. His life became a testament to the power of resilience, proving that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, it was possible to find purpose and meaning. Through his courage and determination, Marcus reminded everyone that while the road ahead might be long, the destination, a fairer, more equitable society, was worth every step.